Hey, I want to welcome you again to Doing It Right. I've got my coffee in hand. I hope you're ready to relax, listen up, or watch the show because it's going to be tremendous. And before we get started, I always like to thank my sponsors. First of all, Betty Ryder Boutique in Preston Center. And the blouse that I'm wearing, it's kind of Japanesey, Asian, I don't know, but it's beautiful. And the jewelry comes from Betty Ryder Boutique in Preston Center. I also want to thank Taylor Bags. Stephanie Taylor is the designer, and she is known for these soft, very plushy, beautiful handbags. I just put one out here that I literally wear almost every day. It's over the shoulder, it goes everywhere, and it carries quite a bit. All sizes. Shop to Stephanie Taylor at taylorbags.com. That's taylorbags.com. So, I've been in the image and etiquette sort of genre for over 25 years. And it's very interesting because at one point in my career, not so long ago actually, I thought, I wonder if that sounds professional enough. And so I kind of switched. And I just began saying leadership development. Well, that's the ocean. And someone took me aside and said, Valerie, stop it. You're the expert in two things. You were the pioneer in business etiquette, and you helped start the image industry. So what are you doing? Well, from now on, I'm not going to do what I said I was going to do. That's who I am. And I'm going to stay authentic to my swim lanes. That's it. Today, you're going to hear from an outstanding man who has won about every journalistic award that you possibly can. Dan Ray is my guest, and he currently is the host on Nightside on Boston's WBZ News Radio, owned by iHeart. Stay tuned.
Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolosky, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Hi, Dan. I want to welcome you to the show, and I'm thrilled to have you on so many levels. Thank you for being my guest instead of me being your guest. How are you today?
Well, you will be my guest later in a few days. Let's put it like that, because I don't know if we're going to date this. But I'm doing very well up here in New England as we are awaiting what might be our first snowstorm of the winter, believe it or not. It's been, it almost sounds like an April Fool's joke, but we got through the winter without a whole lot of snow. A little bit here, a little bit there. And we're looking at one that might be coming in. In New England, what they say about the weather is if you don't like it, just wait a minute and it'll change. So I'm not a weather forecaster, but that's the big news story as I look out the window. Gray clouds.
Oh my gosh.
are on the horizon.
No matter what the news story is, you have covered it. I want to just brag on you if you don't mind for a minute. Don't blush. But
I will not blush, but I thank you for bragging on me. Go right ahead.
Dan, it's amazing the things I'm going to share. First of all, you're a member of the Massachusetts Broadcasters Hall of Fame. That's huge.
That's correct.
An investigative and political reporter. That's got to be interesting, and I want to talk about that today.
Sure.
And honored with the prestigious Yankee Quill Award by the Academy of New England Journalists and the New England Society of Newspaper Editors. Dan, how did you get into this crazy world of journalism?
Well, I was always interested in it, and I actually had graduated from college, dabbled a little bit with a student newspaper, nothing quite serious. I played sports in high school and college, hockey and baseball. I wasn't particularly good at either, but I was able to be on the teams. I knew I wasn't going to go to the NHL or the major leagues. Lost a little bit of military time and then decided, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I went to law school. And while I was at Boston University Law School, it just so happened there was a classmate one day in our second year of law school and said to me, the Boston University radio station is looking for people to sit in and do a talk show, a 1-hour talk show. And I thought this would be great therapy from law school, because law school can be tough. And I did that for about a year. Didn't make any money. Did it really as an avocation. And shortly thereafter, a weekend opening came up for a talk show host at WBZ Radio. I was still in law school. So I did a Saturday night show for 2.5 years. And after I graduated from law school, passed the bar, was practicing law at WBZ TV, said to me, "Hey, you're a lawyer. We need a legal editor on the television side. Would you like to work for us?" I said, "Why not?" And hence that started a 31-year career as a television journalist.
31 years. Dan, you have so many stories. Is there one that really stands out in your mind and heart?
Yeah,
and if so, tell us.
There is. The story of my career, and again, I'll try to distill it. We had a very corrupt FBI office here in Boston for many, many years. They've done movies about it, the Black Mass, and all sorts. There's been a lot of movies. We had corrupt FBI agents who were in positions of power and influence here, where they basically traded off one group of bad guys with another group of bad guys. And in the meantime, there were a lot of innocent victims, people who were jailed for crimes that they did not commit. And that's where my law school training comes in. I was summoned by my dean of my law school and sat down with a lawyer who had been beating his head against the wall. His name was Victor Garrow from Medford, Massachusetts, trying to get a gentleman by the name of Joseph Salvati out of prison. He had been convicted, wrongfully convicted, intentionally convicted by corrupt FBI agents and an individual who was the prototype for the Federal Witness Protection Program, a really bad guy named Joe Barboza. He had killed anywhere from 40 to 50 people in his life, but the FBI figured if anybody knew where the bodies were buried, and literally, and the skeletons in the closet of organized crime, that's the guy. They turned him into an informant, and they allowed him to implicate whoever he wanted, as long as they were giving him as long as he was giving them a couple of really bad guys. They were doing really well with the head of the then FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover knew what was going on. I came to the story in 1993. The story really started in 1965 with a murder that wasn't solved, and then innocent men were implicated by not only the informant, but also by FBI agents. They put these people in prison knowingly and intentionally, realizing that these were innocent men. They may have done other bad things, but they were innocent of this crime. And as a lawyer, you don't prosecute people because they're bad people. You prosecute them for committing bad acts. It took me 4 years to get this one gentleman who I was interested in. His name is Joe Salvati. He was not involved in organized crime at all. He might have been a bouncer at an after-hours club or something like that, but not a heavy hitter. 4 years, got his sentence commuted. Then Governor Bill Weld of Massachusetts commuted his sentence. Then there was an investigation, a grand jury, which discovered all these documents that proved that everything that we knew, all the charges were dropped. And then there was a civil lawsuit filed against the FBI and against the Department of Justice. And on my last day on television, a federal judge up here complimented me and the lawyer who had worked in this case longer than I had. I'd only worked on it for 15 years. And these gentlemen were awarded $101 million. They got the money 3 years later when the Justice Department basically said, we're not going to appeal this case anymore. And they got $116 million. And they got their lives back. Ironically, the guy that I worked on behalf of, Joe Salvati, is 91 years old. Talked to him the other day, and I reminded him that it was about 27 years ago in March. I talked to him in late March when he actually was able to walk out of prison because of the commutation. And I try to talk to him every March of every year, and he's doing very well. He and his wife, who were separated for 30 years, I mean, they were separated by prison walls. Sure. She sent him a card every day, a letter every day. It was an amazing love story. She is still alive. Maria is still alive. Their children are living much more comfortably than Joe ever could have imagined. With the he was awarded $32 million for the 30 or so years he spent incarcerated wrongfully because of corrupt FBI agents.
Oh my gosh, Dan, that's You know, you see movies about this. Have there been any movies like this
Well,
on this?
DreamWorks took an interest in this movie back in the early 2000s. They assigned two of their top producers to the movie, Walter Parks and Julie McDonald. They're a husband and wife team. They had done several big movies for DreamWorks, including Men in Black, and just had done. They're very high profile. And for some reason, DreamWorks offered me money for my involvement in the story, but Salvati had not won his case, so I refused to accept any money because I did not want to be in an ethical situation where someone could say you're still working on this story and therefore you have a financial interest in it. Salvati was given money for his life rights. Darrow was given money for his life rights, and then for some reason, DreamWorks walked away from the story, which to me was unfortunate. And we're still working with the movie producer right now. So it may soon, we keep our fingers crossed, be made into a movie. And I think it should be made into a movie so that people, Americans have very short attention spans. You know, today, yesterday it was Lady Gaga. Today it's Taylor Swift. Who will it be tomorrow? We have short attention spans. This is a story that people should remember a long time, because if they forget, it can happen again.
You know, Dan, well, one of the things you shared as a top takeaway relates to exactly what we've been talking about. You said, be willing and bold to stand for what you believe. Dan, I don't know how many people today are as willing and bold as you have been. You've lived your life like that. What would you say to the audience of emerging leaders, business owners, people who watch this show and they want to learn from people like you what it takes to live the good life, to be successful, but to stay, as you said, who you are? How did you just, in this esteemed career, maintain your own integrity? Because you could have gone over to the dark side probably, but you never did. What was that?
I was accused of that when I first started to work on the story. I have a younger brother, who's a retired state police officer. I'm very pro-police. I am not in any way, shape, or form what you would call a shrinking violet. And people came up to me and said, Dan, you're going over to the dark side here? And these were friends of mine. And I said, no, these guys are actually innocent. They were framed by the FBI. Of course, at that point, people held the FBI, at least in Boston, they were like, oh, they're just on a pedestal of integrity. Well, they didn't. Most of the agents were fine, but there was this group of agents who were able to function within the FBI with the knowledge and approval of J. Edgar Hoover here in Boston. They did what they wanted. They got raises for the convictions. They got certificates of appreciation, letters of commendation, and they also were, at that time, back in the late 60s and early 70s, while Hoover was still alive, they were Hoover's favorite FBI agents.
My gosh.
You basically, they had the carte blanche to do whatever they want. When I finally got to the story, I followed my own conscience, but at the same time, I thought to myself, what would have I done, 25 years beforehand, if I was just out of law school and I was a prosecutor, an assistant district attorney, and they gave me a case that I knew was a bad case? Would have I stood up in the 1960s and said, hey, this is a bad, I'd like to think I would, but I'll never know. I always had that in the back of my mind, because many of these people were weak individuals who decided to get along, you go along. And, all of us sometimes have to go along with some things in life. We have to stop at red lights. We have to respect stop signs and all that. But when it comes to the life and liberty of U.S. American citizens, who I came to believe had been wrongfully convicted for a crime that they had nothing to do with it, irrespective of what their backgrounds were. Again, none of them were, monks who were not worldly men. That's not the point.
Right.
You got to do the right thing. just as your sign says, do the right thing.
That has served me very well, I'll tell you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
say
And
it to
again, was it Shakespeare who said always be true to yourself and you'll never be false to someone else? Look, I'm not a perfect human being by any stretch of the imagination, but I think I took my job seriously. I'm in a different role now as a talk show host. I can express my feelings more. The Salvati case was really one of the times that I took on a big institution, the FBI, and I took them on in a matter of advocacy journalism. Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes, who was sort of a hero of mine, he and I worked very closely. We had a big piece, a huge piece with Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes, in which he gave me tremendous credit for the work that I had done in the story. So there were great rewards for doing the right thing. And generally there are rewards for doing the right thing.
Dan, when was that? I'm going to go back and watch, and I'm sure some of my audience will too. When was that on?
Yeah, it was, you have to go back. It was in 2001.
Okay.
It was after these men's names had been cleared, but before they won this amazing amount of money, $116 million. But that, if you can, go through CBS reports, it was Mike Wallace was the correspondent. He did a story on what we had accomplished here in Boston, and I want to say May of 2001, but I don't hold me to that. I know it was 2001.
Fascinating. And what about interviewing all the many presidents? Can you, I'll leave it an open-ended question. Give us a story about one or two.
Well, I must tell you that I've never interviewed Donald Trump, and I've spoken with Joe Biden, but I've never done a sit-down interview with him. The other presidents, because we have the New Hampshire primary, you get amazing access as a television reporter. Interviewed Gerald Ford after his presidency, interviewed Jimmy Carter many times. Really nice guy. I think he was the victim of some bad timing. America's stock had kind of fallen post-Watergate and post-Vietnam, and then the Iranian hostage crisis. My favorite, I'll make no bones about it, in two respects. The ones who I interviewed probably the most were Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. Reagan was always wonderful, although people can look this up. He lost the Iowa caucus in 1980 to George Herbert Walker Bush. And I remember interviewing and being in the same room with Reagan a couple of nights, maybe even the night after that Iowa caucus. And he was there with Nancy, and he really looked discouraged because now, again, George Bush basically did the groundwork that was needed to be done, and it was really the lowest I've ever seen him. But he rallied, and he had that big moment up in New Hampshire where they tried to shut his microphone off, and he's indignant, rose to the occasion and said, "Mr. Breen, I've paid for this microphone," and of course the rest is history. In terms of Bill Clinton was always very gregarious. Interviewed him probably more than any of the presidents. I love to talk about different times when I think Clinton was a little less than forthcoming with the truth, or maybe I should put it like this: he always believed in what he said. So when Bill Clinton said, "I did not have sex with that woman," he really believed it, okay? Because he was thinking of it in the traditional biblical sense, if you get my drift. And I remember the first time I sat with him for an hour. The year before, he had told people in Arkansas, "Hey, please elect me in 1990 as your governor." He had lost the governorship. He wanted to get the governorship, and they had made a 4-year term. So I sat with him. I said, "Look, this was December of '91. I said, Governor, you're very low in the polls here, and it's not likely you're going to become president." And of course, he did become president. But I said, "You can't both be governor and president. You can't be governor of Arkansas and president at the same time." And Clinton looked at me and said, "Yep, that's right. That's right." I said, "But didn't you promise the people of Arkansas last November, 13 months ago, that if reelected, which you were, you would serve the entire 4-year term?" I did say that. I said that at the time. Yes, I did. So I said, did you mislead the people of Arkansas? Well, I really meant it when I said it.
Oh,
Okay. So what did you do? Did the people of Arkansas have a plebiscite to allow you to run? Well, he's not quite exactly. But last May, I drove around the state. Nearly everybody told me I should run for president.
oh,
And he believed it. And he
Dan,
did run and he won.
isn't that?
But he
I'm like,
believed it in his heart. I could just tell this guy believed it, that he promised, he meant the promise, but he made it. But that was yesterday's news.
Dan, have you written a big, thick book yet?
I don't have time.
Oh.
Valerie, as you probably know, I'm on the air Monday through Friday night on WBZ, Nightside with Dan Ray. And we interview a real wide variety of guests. We're going to be together on my show. It's just sort of like a home and home match here. So we'll have you on my show in a few days. And I literally don't have the time. And look, there are a lot of television reporters around the country, TV reporters who've done great stories. I don't know that my story necessarily is any better than theirs. And I don't know that if I wrote a book, it would be a nice memoir for my family, but I'm not sure how many people would want to buy it, to be really honest with you.
Well, I won't argue with you, but I will off camera. How's that?
Fair enough.
And stories like this are just so wonderful for all of us to hear. And yes, this is a little bit of a plug, but every guest has a wonderful story. And what is it about those red buttons, those subscribe buttons, Dan? Now I'm talking journalist to journalist. Those viewerships, those comments that you love to see about your show. What is it that we just can't seem to get people to understand? That's how we get feedback on whether we're doing anything that is mattering or not. What would you say to your audience?
Well, I want to know, tell me what you think. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like.
Right.
Just because you don't like it doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing it.
Right.
But try to make a case. Reasonable people can disagree reasonably. I tend to return phone calls to my listeners if they send me a nasty email.
Yeah.
And about 90% of the people are surprised that you return the phone call, that you answer them.
Yeah.
About 10% doesn't matter. They'll never like you anyway. You have to realize, that's out there, but you have to ignore it. Because if you bounce from email to email or tweet to tweet, I love your show, I hate your show, do more of this, do less of this, whatever.
Right.
You're allowing the people who watch, I want input, I want suggestions, but at the same time, some people will give you suggestions that, just aren't going to work. I mean, was it Franklin Roosevelt who said, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time?
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, people get elected president with 50% of the vote, or sometimes even less than 50% of the vote. I want my audience to listen to my show, and I want them to come there, and I want them to learn something. So on my show tonight, we will be talking with a family up here, and I know this is going to be dated, but this is my show that I'm working on tonight. I'll give it a plug just so people have a sense of it. There's a family in the suburb of Boston who had a very respectful signage on their fence at their home to remember the Israeli hostages, the Israeli-American hostages.
Yes.
And they had pictures, and the sign stayed, and the pictures of the hostages sign stayed undisturbed for months. A couple of weeks ago, someone came by and spray painted, ripped the pictures down. It was a horrible job.
Oh my goodness.
And this Sunday, I will stand with them, and we will put those hostage pictures back up.
Good.
And there'll be many other people there as well. So that's one story tonight. And then the other story that I'm looking at, and I'm beginning to perceive this, is that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I've never had on my show. So I don't have a dog in that fight in any way, shape, or form. I've never had Trump on. I've never had RFK on, and I've never had President Biden in a formal interview setting. I've chatted with him, talked with him. But I think there's something out there, and I think Kennedy, if he sticks with it, may be stronger than people are going to realize. There's some interesting polls that have just come out tonight, which we'll talk about that. His favorability poll, his numbers in favorability for the first time now are above both President Trump and President Biden, former President Trump and President Biden. And sometimes favorability gives you some insight as to where the real polls, who you're going to vote for, might be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months down the road. So we're going to talk about that tonight as well.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Dan, what's a question that no one has ever asked you and you wish they had?
Boy, that's a tough question. I got to be honest with you. I guess the secret to a happy life, because I don't have an answer to that question. I have theories, but I think into every life, we're going to have beautiful sunny days and wonderful interviews like this. And then the next day it might snow here in New England in April. And so my advice, if someone asked me that, would be to take it a day at a time, do the best you can. I've had several close friends who have passed away in the last few days.
No, I'm so
none
sorry.
of them really unexpected, but you get on in life, and one lesson I've learned is nobody gets out of this life alive. And so why not do whatever you can to help people along the way while we're here?
That's very well said, and it comes from your heart. And I think that's the other thing that is important in journalism today. I studied, that was my major, journalism. And I think about back when I went to school and what I studied, and it's not the same as it was. What's the one piece of journalistic work that you would say to people who are considering getting into it to stay the course like you have, to not give up, because it's not easy?
Yeah.
So give us
I think the one thing that I would viewers, everybody is now in a silo. So you either watch Fox News or you watch MSNBC.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I think the advent of the internet has helped in so many ways in being able to do what we're doing right now, for example. But it's hurt in that it has fractured the news market. So therefore, you now have people who have a microphone. It may be a small microphone, but they got a microphone on the far extremes in this country. And those extremes are pulling the country apart. And I'm really worried about that. I'm trying to appeal as best I can. I acknowledge that I'm a fairly conservative person, okay? I'm stylistically and philosophically. But I want to have people who spend time, get to know folks on the other side. I mean, I would lose most votes in my family between my wife and kids. I mean, but you still love those people.
Right.
The other thing that I think is really important is make the distinction between news and opinion. In the old days, whatever you read on the front page or the inside papers of the newspaper, you knew it was not colored by the viewpoint of the reporter. They reported it, the who, when, what, where, and why, the 5 pillars of journalism. It's kind of like, a baseball box score. Tell me what happened, what the score was, what team won. Don't tell me what team you wished had won. Tell me the truth, okay? The factual. If you want to get into what I'm doing now as a commentator, as a talk show host, and you want to express your opinion, become an op-ed writer or become an editorial writer. Those lines have been blurred everywhere in the best newspapers in the country. And that's a problem. The American people now don't understand the difference between, fact and opinion, truth and opinion. And that is what we have lost this generation. And that's going to come back to haunt us someday. And I hope it doesn't end up in, dare I say, a civil war. because that's was the root of the Civil War in 1860. You know, the opinions were so far apart, and they couldn't agree in any way, shape, or form on, you know, the morality of slavery. I mean, how could that possibly be? Well, we fought a war over it and got that resolved. But there's stuff going on today in this country which is very scary on the extreme right and on the extreme left. Right. And we need to be aware of that. And the vast majority of us need to not to be seduced by the people on either extreme, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. I couldn't have said it better, and it's deep. What you just said is very deep and very true. Who do you admire, Dan, in the industry now?
I still admire 60 Minutes. Sharon Alfonsi is one of the reporters there. Sharon and I used to work together at WBZ in Boston. I think that the correspondents, I know them well enough to know what their views might be, either personally or from having watched them over the years. But I still think that 60 Minutes is a solid a news program as you can get. In terms of, I look at people who held true to their beliefs. I believe that the two great presidents of the 20th century, because the books have been written in the first half of the century, Roosevelt, who there's no question, I think with historians would agree that Roosevelt was the greatest president of the first half of the 20th century, you know, basically brought the country through a depression. Maybe there were mistakes he made, maybe not. World War II defeated fascism around the world. And Reagan is the greatest president, in my opinion, of the last half of the 20th century. They both had sets of beliefs and ideals that they hung to, they stuck with. And Reagan, although he was not president, shortly after he left, he had told and exhorted Gorbachev to, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And indeed, that wall fell in the fall of 1989, and the world was a better place. So those would be the two people that I would admire most. But again, there's no one today who I could see putting in that pantheon.
And that's a sad thing. We need to be praying hard for the generation coming up who might consider politics to do it right.
Right. And so many of the foundations of our country, I mean, we've had here in Boston, we were the ground zero for the pedophile priest scandal. And the cardinal at that time was a guy named Bernard Law, who I knew really well. And when the truth be told, in the film Spotlight, which was an Academy Award-winning film here in Boston, of the Boston Globe coverage of that, I find it incomprehensible for someone to go to a church leader and say to the church leader, look, Father so-and-so has been taking advantage of children, little boys, and occasionally whatever. I would have expected the cardinal that I knew and who I traveled with to have said, bring that guy in here. I want to personally rip the collar off his neck. Right. That's not what happened.
I know.
And the Catholic Church, which is a big institution in Boston, has never been the same. It's going to take them decades to recover, if they ever do recover. And as someone who is a flawed but a practicing Catholic, nonetheless brought up as a Catholic, it really bothers me. It really bothers me. And this was a cover-up that went beyond cardinal law. It was worldwide. And, so religion, which used to be one of the foundational pillars of our society, that has been diminished. Respect for other people's viewpoints, another pillar of our society, that has been diminished. We got to start to build those pillars of our society back up and make America as strong as it once was. We're ripped apart. And again, I still come back to the internet. Everybody has an opinion, and so many people do not have enough. They don't have a true north. So they listen to the last thing they saw on the internet. Well, that's interesting. I agree with that. And then they go on to another 20-second, oh yeah, now I believe with that. They go back and forth. Yeah. We've lost civics in school. I mean, I could go on and on how we could put this country back together, but your audience probably would be bored. I mean, look, I have people who call the show, and I know that they have no concept of what the Bill of Rights means, how it came to be. I had a high school civics teacher. His name was Mr. Doherty in the 9th grade, who lit a spark in me about what this country means. And we're unique. We've been around a long time. And I hope we can stay around even many, many, centuries into the future. But right now, the foundations are crumbling, and we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah.
That's this, we also worry about the Russians invading us. No. If there's a problem, it's a problem within. It's a problem within.
It's that finger pointing out, but the thumb is pointing back. That's
correct. Well, when they say when you point at your face in the mirror, you have 4 fingers, at least 3 fingers pointing back at you.
It's true. Listen, Dan, I could go on for 2 hours with you, and I want to have you back. How can people get in touch with you, watch your show? We'll put it on the banner, of course, right under you. So give us that information.
It's real simple. They can go to, they can listen to us on WBZ radio. If they can't watch it, they can look at the radio and listen. We're 1030 on the AM dial. We're heard in 38 states with what we call terrestrial radio. Doesn't mean that everybody in every state can hear us with over-the-air radio, but car radios, home radios, and of course we're on the internet. Just go to WBZ Boston or WBZ Radio, and there's a button there that they can hit, and they can listen to me. I have lots of listeners all over the world, literally, who I know and have gotten to know. I have lots of listeners all over the country, listeners in Alaska, listeners in Hawaii, California, Oregon, Washington. The farthest reaches from Massachusetts, Florida. And they can always contact me if they like what I'm saying. Just spell my name correctly, D-A-N-R-E-A, Dan Ray. It's the Irish spelling of R-E-A, at iHeartMedia.com. Pretty simple, straightforward.
Dan, thank you so much for being on the show, for all of your wisdom, for your deep-held beliefs that I know we all need more of. And I want you to stay tuned for something I call my VALERIE'Sm, which is always a little philosophical something. And it really goes to what we talked about. And this came from actually our minister this last Sunday. He says, people say what they think, but they do what they believe. I'm going to say it again, and then I'm just going to let you absorb it. People say what they think, but they do what they believe. So audience, thanks for staying with us. Continue to make comments. That's the only way I know that you're getting something from the effort of putting together a show that comes from my heart to you. And I pray every show that something touches you. And I know today there's been many things that likely have done just that. And so, again, Dan, thank you. And audience, come back and share the shows, hit the red button, and love you bunch. Have another cup of coffee.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's Voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, ValerieandCompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.